2024 has been a fantastic year for games. There have been many really great games, no matter what people like to claim, with there being no games that are coming out. Honestly, I've not been able to keep up with all these amazing games that have come out this year, so I haven't been able to play everything, but I believe these are the best 10 games that I played this year, barring some stipulations obviously. I haven't only played new games this year, I've played plenty of really great games this year that didn't come out this year. Games such as Ico, Okami and Dave the Diver are all games that I loved, but because they didn't come out this year, I don't feel like it's fair to include them. However, I am including remakes and remasters that did come out this year, as I count them as new releases, not only to me, but to a lot of other people too. That being said, there's going to be some notable omissions from my list. I feel like I should rip off the band-aid now. Because I'm only one guy with only so much free time, I can't play everything. So the first notable title I did not play was Helldivers 2, simply for the fact that I don't really care for multiplayer games, and don't have friends who want to play either. The game looks great and a lot of fun, but not for me. Speaking of games that are not for me, Balatro is another game that just doesn't speak to me, unfortunately. I have nothing but admiration and respect for Local Thunk for making the game on his own and being the breakout success that it is. I just know I wouldn't enjoy it. And a couple more games I want to play but simply haven't had the time to get to yet are Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong and Space Marine 2. All games I'm hoping I can get to soon because all seem great and right up my alley. Now that's out of the way, let me list my 10 favourite games of 2024. The Plucky Squire is a game that I'd been extremely excited for since it was first announced. The art was stunning, the gameplay looked like it was going for a Zelda approach, and it had some British whimsy and charm to it, and it was shaping up to potentially be one of my favourite indies. Unfortunately, the game was perhaps my biggest disappointment of the year, which speaks volumes on how my year in gaming was if the biggest disappointment of the year is still number 10. Because even though I was pretty disappointed with it, I still enjoyed a lot of it. The art is absolutely stunning and is a real highlight of the game, but unfortunately for me, this falls under the whole all style and no substance. The game as a game is pretty threadbare. The game is terribly simple to the point of boredom. I know the target audience is meant to be younger audiences, but there are times where it feels insultingly simple, and although it has a lot of different mini-games to try and spice things up, it's still too simple to make any sort of impression. I think what hurts the game more is the fact released near to a game that may or may not come up later on this list, making it look worse in comparison. But still, I got enjoyment out of it, and I think if given another chance, all possible futures could make something truly great. Tales of Genzaro Zao is just one of 3 Metroidvanias on this list, and unfortunately all 3 are some of the most underrated games of the year, but my least favourite of the 3 was Zao. Zao was the first game from Surgent Studios, who's headed up by actor Abubakar Salim, who has done a few roles in video games and is clearly very passionate about the industry. He announced the game at last year's Game Awards and was very emotional, as the game was inspired by the loss of his dad, and that's what fueled the narrative for the game and is at the forefront. It's quite unique to have a Metroidvania focus on its story instead of gameplay, and for the most part, I think it's good, but I can't help but feel it's unfortunately the game's undoing at the same time. I love the story, and the gameplay what is there is fun, it's just held back by its own narrative having to follow a linear path. As for the most part, it just makes exploration and the upgrade path feel rather unrewarding, something that 2 Metroidvanias do a lot better later on in this list, but for a first attempt at a game, Surgent Studios did a really good job, and I hope they'll have the chance to do something again. Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom was the grand return for 2D Zelda, with it being over 10 years since our last original non-multiplayer Zelda, and I'm so happy that it's good. For the first time in the series, we actually get to play as our title character, Zelda, and before anyone says anything, don't bring up those games, they don't count. But it's so nice to have a return to 2D Zelda, because it genuinely seemed like for a while that we may never get another one, with the absolute monstrous success of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom compared to the previous Zelda games sales-wise. It just seemed like Nintendo would want to focus all their time and resources into 3D Zelda, but lo and behold, Nintendo blessed us with a very unique approach to it. It had a lot what made 2D Zelda, but added a lot of freedom into the newer 3D Zelda as well. The new Echo mechanic, which is very clever and unique, works really well for puzzle solving. Combat, not so much, and by the time the game reaches its conclusion, the mechanic does feel a little stale, but for a one-off game, it works well, and I had a blast. And it makes me so glad that 2D Zelda is back, and hopefully it's here to stay. Ubisoft have had a year to forget in 2024. Skull and Bones finally came out after over 10 years in development and was about as good as you would expect. X-Defiant came out and closed down in 6 months. Star Wars Outlaws looked pretty ambitious but ended up pretty average, and Assassin's Creed Shadows was pushed till next year. But Ubisoft did have one good thing this year, and that was right at the start of the year with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Because holy moly, what a game. It's pretty easy to dunk on Ubisoft as a terrible company, and for good reason. They've been shoveling out slop for over a decade now. It seems easy to forget that Ubisoft was once a beloved studio that put out some amazing games, and the Ubisoft team behind a lot of them are Ubisoft Montpellier, and they were behind The Lost Crown. It feels like the opposite to Zao to me. The story is a bit of whatever, but the gameplay of The Lost Crown is some of the best in any Metroidvania. Its tight, engaging combat puts most other Metroidvanias to shame, and the world is so satisfying to explore, with upgrades that are not very plentiful, but oh so cleverly made. It's an absolute shame that we won't be seeing a sequel due to the game's poor sales, because truly this is the best thing that Ubisoft has put out in a very long time. It just seems like Ubisoft will keep on losing. I think this speaks volumes of how good this year was for video games, when a remake of one of the most beloved RPGs of all time is only number 6 on the list, but that does not mean that I did not like it, far from it. It's just a testament to how good this year has been for games for me. Thousand Year Door has been one of them games that I've been heard nothing but great things about for years, but due to the price of the GameCube game, I'd never been able to play it. But when the remake was announced, I was primed and ready to see what all the fuss was about, and you know what? I think it very much lived up to the hype. Paper Mario fans have been at war with Nintendo for years on what a Paper Mario game should be, as each new entry just does not seem to understand what made the Thousand Year Door so special. And after never playing any of the other Paper Mario games before, I feel like I know what they're on about, because this is just about everything you'd want from a Mario RPG. The story is great, and for a Mario story, it's like Shakespeare. It's so cleverly written and funny, like actually funny. Something I can't say about a lot of games. The gameplay is nothing revolutionary, but when it comes to turn-based combat, it works, and it's fun, and that's all it needs to be. And I was surprised of how good the exploration was. It really did meet all my expectations, and now I'm a Paper Mario fan, hoping the series goes back to this format, because the Thousand Year Door truly is fantastic. My biggest crime being a huge horror enjoyer was until this year I had never played Silent Hill 2. Of course I had heard the legendary game that it was, and honestly I feel a little ashamed it took me this long to play it, because in my opinion this is what a horror game should be. Resident Evil has been the horror game franchise for a long time now, but Silent Hill 2 just understands what makes a true, grimy, psychological experience. A lot of credit needs to go to Bloober Team, as I don't think anyone thought they would pull this remake off, let alone do it this well. As for most people, this is the optimal version to play, as the gameplay has been modernised to play more up to modern standards, while pretty much changing nothing when it comes to the story or the characters, which is good, because that's what makes Silent Hill 2 so legendary. Luke Roberts absolutely killed it as James Sunderland. His performance will stick with me for a long time. This game is on the long side for a horror game, but the game was paced so well it didn't feel like it was 18 hours long. I played it back to back with one of my friends, and I didn't feel fatigued by the end of it. It was a grimy, horrific experience in the best possible way. A quick little intermission to mention 2 games that didn't make the list for a few reasons, but I would put in between Silent Hill and number 4. Firstly is Shadow of the Erdtree. Fantastic DLC, Miyazaki does not miss, but unlike Jeff Keighley, I do not include DLC, especially ones that require significant progress in the main game. The second one is a little more complicated. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a lot of people's favourite game of the year, and I get it, I really do, but I have a lot of complicated feelings about that I don't really have time for today. Just know, I really love what I played, but I don't feel right ranking it on this list when I haven't even experienced half the game's content. So putting it in between a 5 and a 4 feels right, a 4.5 if you want to put a number on it. Anyway, on to number 4. Now I don't want to say I can predict the future, but I did call on the greatness of this game before the release. But to be fair, I think anyone who's played Astro's Playroom could see how talented Team Asobi are, because holy heck, they cooked. This is an absolutely fantastic platformer, even better than anyone thought it was going to be. A complete love letter to Sony's history. No matter if you've been a PlayStation fan for 30 years or just a couple of years, you will get something out of this. But even without the loving homage to PlayStation, this is just a really well made platformer that's charming, clever, and just plain fun. I don't think you can play this without having at least a little bit of a smile. I mean, I'm dead inside, but I was smiling ear to ear while playing this. And the success of this game is only a good thing for the industry, showing we want more things like Astrobot and not slop like Concord. Also very deserving of Keighley's Game of the Year, which, I want to say, when people started to get heated that this won and said things like this is just a Mario clone, like that isn't the biggest compliment you could possibly give Astrobot. Mario is and always has been the 3D platformer, so saying Astrobot is just another one of them is the highest compliment you can give to any 3D platformer. Now here is the most underrated game of the year, and arguably the hardest, but certainly the best Metroidvania. As someone who, like many of you, I'm salivating at the mouth waiting for Silksong, but also like many of you, I'm kinda getting antsy on how long we've been waiting for it, as nearly 5 years later we still have no release date. So I've been trying to fill a hole that's been there since I first finished Hollow Knight, and Nine Souls might just be the closest game has come to filling that hole, because if anyone watching this video takes anything from it, please let it be I should play Nine Souls, because this game is incredible. Taking heavy inspiration from obviously Hollow Knight, but also Sekiro, this is the most challenging game I played this year, and I absolutely loved it. This has both a really great story that Zao has, as well as the satisfying combat and exploration and upgrade path that the Lost Crown has as well, as having a whole unique Tau Punk setting that I've never seen in a game before. This is as well as having the same satisfying moments that Sekiro has, where you're getting annihilated by a boss only for something just to click and you turn in the tables. The feeling is so good, and the final boss, I tell you, if you like a challenge, she might be the best boss fight I've fought. So if you, like me, are fed up of waiting for Silksong, please try Nine Souls. Now this was hard to rank, the second and first games on my list, because for a while they were the other way round, and depending on what day you find me, I might put Metaphor on number 1, because this game is truly something special. I knew what we were going to get was going to be good because Atlus and Katsura Hashino don't know how to make a bad game, but this truly exceeded my expectations. Although I think the story takes a little while to find its feet, 55 hours of my 60 hours was some of the best hours I had playing a game this year. The characters are among, if not my favourite in a JRPG. I would die for Stroll and Basilio, and Luis is a beautifully evil main villain that rivals even Sephiroth with how intimidating this man is, and his design oozes style like everything else does in the game, and the gameplay is somehow even better than what Atlus did with Persona 5. I genuinely think that this might be the best turn-based combat ever put into a game. It's fun, it's engaging, it's got challenge to it. As well as this, with perfectly designed dungeons, this very well might be Atlus's best game, but for me, when I listened to what my heart said, there was only one choice, what my number 1 should be. Now like I said just before, Metaphor is probably the better game in every aspect. The story, the gameplay, the characters, the dungeons, everything that makes an Atlus RPG the best on the market is done better in Metaphor. So why is Persona 3 Reload my number 1? Well, ultimately, this is my list, and all I can say is that Persona 3 did something to me that not many games have done before. Due to the nature of how many games I've played over the years, when I finish one, I move on to play the next thing, and so on and so forth. But with Persona 3, that was different. Due to the ending of the game affecting me like no other ending to a game has before or since, the game has stuck with me to this day, and even though I've played other amazing games since Persona 3, it's always been there on my mind, unable to move on mentally, even though it's been nearly a year since I finished it. So for that reason, and many more which I want to make a video about soon, Persona 3 Reload is my game of the year. Now the wonderful thing about opinions is that we all have them and they're not going to be the same as mine. So please let me know what your top 10 games of the year are, and I would love to hear them. So if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. My first year on YouTube has been a learning experience, and I can't wait to see what's to come in 2025. So I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and hopefully I will see you again.